Daniel Mercer thought the worst was behind him. Divorce, loneliness, starting over. He was wrong. The quiet neighbor who smiled at him through the window wasn't who she seemed. She was running from a billionaire who built empires and destroyed lives. And now, that man wanted Daniel's daughter taken away. If you want to see how far a single father will go to protect everything he loves, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Daniel Mercer stood in the kitchen of a house that didn't feel like home, staring at a sink full of dishes he'd meant to wash 2 days ago. The morning light came in pale and reluctant through the window over the counter, illuminating crumbs on the linoleum and a juice stain shaped like a comet. Sophie's cereal bowl sat abandoned on the table, a few soggy flakes floating in pink milk. She was 6 years old, and she'd discovered strawberry-flavored cereal exactly 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, which meant Daniel now kept 4 boxes of the stuff in the pantry at all times because the thought of her crying over something he could actually fix was unbearable. He rubbed his eyes. Sleep had been theoretical lately, something other people did. People whose lives hadn't imploded in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon. "Daddy, I can't find my purple shirt," Sophie's voice carried from the hallway, high and worried. She was still in her pajamas, standing in the doorway of her new bedroom, the one with the crack in the ceiling and the closet door that stuck. "The one with the sparkles?" Daniel asked. "No, the one with the cat." "Right, cat. Give me a second, sweetheart." He moved past her into the small room, scanning the explosion of clothes that hadn't quite made it into drawers yet. Boxes still lined one wall, some labeled in his ex-wife's neat handwriting. Sophie. Winter. Sophie. Shoes, Sophie. Miscellaneous. He didn't know what miscellaneous meant for a 6-year-old, and he hadn't opened that box yet. The purple shirt was wedged behind her bookshelf. He pulled it free and handed it over. "There you go." Sophie took it, her small fingers clutching the fabric. "Is Mommy coming this weekend?" Daniel's chest tightened. "Not this weekend, honey. Remember? She's got that work thing. She always has a work thing." "I know. Are you sad?" He crouched down so they were eye to eye. Sophie had his brown hair and his mother's green eyes, and right now those eyes were watching him with the kind of careful attention that made him feel like she could see straight through him. "I'm okay," he said. "And you've got me, right? We're a team." She nodded but didn't smile. Then she hugged him, quick and fierce, before pulling away and heading back to her room to change. Daniel stood up slowly, his knees protesting. He was 32 and his body already felt older. That's what happened when you carried everything alone. He went back to the kitchen and started washing dishes, letting the hot water scald his hands. The rhythm was familiar now: scrub, rinse, set in the rack, repeat. It was meditative in a way that didn't require thinking, which was good because thinking led to remembering, and remembering led to the night Amanda had told him she didn't love him anymore. "I don't know if I ever did," she'd said. 3 years of marriage, 1 daughter, and she didn't know. The glass he was holding slipped and cracked against the edge of the sink. He swore under his breath, picked out the largest pieces, and wrapped them in a paper towel. Through the window, he caught movement. The house next door had been empty when they moved in 2 months ago, but someone had moved in quietly last week. He'd seen a moving truck one morning, gone by the time he got home from work. No meet and greet, no casserole on the doorstep, just the sense that the house, which had been dark and vacant, now had a heartbeat. And now, standing in her own kitchen, was a woman. She was turned slightly away, pouring something from a kettle into a mug. Her hair was dark, pulled back, and she wore a loose sweater that looked soft even from a distance. There was something about the way she moved, unhurried, deliberate, that made the chaos of his own kitchen feel louder by comparison. Then she looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. Daniel froze, dish rag still in his hand, water dripping onto his shoes. She didn't look away. Instead, she smiled. Not broad, not performative, just a small, genuine curve of her lips, and lifted her mug slightly, as if in greeting. He should have smiled back. Waved, maybe. Done something normal. Instead, he just stood there like an idiot until she turned away, and even then he kept staring at the space where she'd been. "Daddy, I'm ready!" Sophie's voice snapped him back. He dried his hands and turned off the water, but the image of the woman stayed with him, her calm, her smile. The strange weight of that single moment. Work was a blur of spreadsheets and conference calls that could have been emails. Daniel worked in logistics for a mid-sized distribution company, the kind of job that paid the bills and crushed the soul in equal measure. He spent 8 hours a day coordinating shipments, managing inventory databases, and listening to his boss, Greg, complain about his fantasy football team. Seriously, man, I had him benched, and he goes off for 3 touchdowns. 3. What am I supposed to do with that? Yeah, Daniel said, not looking up from his screen. Rough. You're not even listening. I'm listening. What'd I just say? Something about touchdowns. Greg sighed. You doing okay? You seem, I don't know, off. Daniel finally looked up. Greg was leaning against the edge of the cubicle, arms crossed, genuinely concerned in that awkward way men had when they didn't know how to ask if you were falling apart. I'm fine, Daniel said. Just tired. You've been tired for 2 months. Yeah, well, single parenting's no joke. Greg nodded slowly. Amanda's still being difficult? She's not difficult. She's just not around. That's difficult, man. Daniel didn't have a response to that, so he just shrugged and went back to his screen. Greg got the message and wandered off. The rest of the day dragged. By the time 5 o'clock hit, Daniel's eyes were burning and his neck was stiff from hunching over his desk. He packed up, said goodbye to no one in particular, and drove home through traffic that moved like sludge. Sophie's daycare was on the way. He pulled into the lot and saw her immediately, sitting on a bench near the door, swinging her legs, her purple cat shirt now smudged with what looked like paint. She saw him and her face lit up. That smile was the only thing that made the day worth it. Hey kiddo, how was school? We made butterflies with tissue paper and mine was the best. I believe it. She climbed into the back seat and buckled herself in, chattering the whole way home about butterflies and a boy named Connor who ate glue and a girl named Emily who could do a cartwheel. Daniel listened, made the appropriate noises, and tried not to think about the woman next door. He failed. That evening, after Sophie was fed and bathed and tucked into bed with her stuffed rabbit, Daniel stood in the backyard with a beer he didn't really want. The fence between his yard and the neighbors was in bad shape. Half the slats were missing, the posts leaned at drunken angles, and the whole thing looked like it might collapse if you breathed on it too hard. He should fix it, add it to the list. The list was long. Fix fence, unpack boxes, replace kitchen faucet, find a better paying job, learn to cook something other than spaghetti, figure out how to be both parents at once. He took a sip of beer and stared at the fence. It's worse than it looks. Daniel turned. The woman from next door was standing on her side of the fence, hands in the pockets of a cardigan. Up close, she was striking in a way that didn't announce itself. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, a face that looked like it had stories but wasn't interested in telling them. Sorry, she said. Didn't mean to sneak up on you. I'm Elena, just moved in. Daniel, he set the beer down on the porch railing. And yeah, the fence is pretty bad. It's on my list. Long list? You have no idea, she smiled faintly. I might. There was a beat of silence, not uncomfortable, but weighted, like they were both deciding what kind of neighbors they were going to be. I saw you this morning, Elena said. Through the window. Yeah, I saw you too. You looked like you were drowning in dishes, Daniel laughed, despite himself. That obvious? I've been there. You have kids? No? Something flickered across her face, too fast to read. Just me. Well, if you ever need to borrow a cup of sugar or a mountain of laundry, I'm your guy. She laughed, a real laugh, low and warm. I'll keep that in mind. They stood there for another moment, and then Elena glanced back at her house. I should go, but if you need help with the fence, let me know. I'm pretty good with a hammer. Seriously? Seriously. And then she was gone, disappearing through her back door and leaving Daniel standing alone in the yard, wondering what the hell had just happened. The next morning, Daniel woke to the sound of hammering. He stumbled to the window and looked out. Elena was in the backyard wearing jeans and a t-shirt, hair tied back, wrenching a broken slat off the fence with a crowbar. Jesus, Daniel muttered. He threw on a shirt and went outside. What are you doing? Elena looked over her shoulder. Fixing the fence. You don't have to do that. I know, but I'm doing it anyway. She pulled the slat free and tossed it into a pile. You coming to help or just supervising? Daniel grabbed a pair of work gloves from the shed and joined her. They worked in silence for a while, pulling down the broken pieces and measuring new slats. Elena moved with efficiency, no wasted motion, and Daniel found himself watching her more than he should have. You do this a lot? He asked. What, fix fences? Yeah, not really, but I've done enough odd jobs to figure it out. Odd jobs? She didn't answer right away. I've had a lot of lives, she said finally. This is just the latest one. It wasn't an answer, but Daniel didn't push. By the time Sophie woke up, half the fence was rebuilt. Elena had brought coffee in a thermos, and they sat on the back steps, drinking it while Sophie played with her dolls in the grass. You're really good at this, Daniel said. At what? Showing up? Elena looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. So are you. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. That's still showing up. Sophie ran over and climbed into Daniel's lap, sticky hands and all. She looked at Elena with open curiosity. Who are you? I'm Elena. I live next door. Do you have kids? No. Why not? Sophie, Daniel said. That's not polite. It's okay, Elena said. She crouched down to Sophie's level. I just haven't met the right people yet. Sophie seemed to accept this. Do you like butterflies? I do. I made one yesterday. It was the best one. I believe it. Sophie grinned and ran off again, satisfied. Daniel exhaled. Sorry, she's a lot sometimes. She's wonderful, Elena said quietly. And the way she said it, like she meant it, like she saw something precious and fragile and worth protecting, made Daniel's throat tighten. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena became a fixture in their lives in small, unexpected ways. She brought over muffins on Saturday morning. She helped Sophie build a fort out of couch cushions. She sat on the porch with Daniel after Sophie went to bed, and they talked about nothing and everything. Jobs they'd hated, places they'd lived, the strange loneliness of starting over. Elena was careful with her past. She mentioned a corporate job she'd left, a partnership that had ended badly, a life that had stopped fitting. I walked away from a lot of money, she said one night. Why? Because it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to someone I used to be. Daniel wanted to ask more, but something in her expression stopped him. Do you regret it? He asked instead. No. She looked at him. Do you regret your divorce? I regret that it happened. I don't regret that it's over. That's honest. I'm too tired to lie. She smiled. Good. It was Sophie who asked the question Daniel had been avoiding. Is Elena your girlfriend? They were sitting at the kitchen table, Sophie working on a coloring book while Daniel tried to make sense of a bill from the electric company. What? No, she's just a friend. But you like her. Sure, she's nice. No, I mean, you like her, like Mommy used to like you. Daniel set the bill down. It's not like that, Soph. Why not? Because it's complicated. You always say that when you don't want to explain. She wasn't wrong. Elena and I are just friends, Daniel said carefully, and that's okay. Not everything has to be more than that. Sophie went back to coloring, apparently satisfied. But Daniel sat there long after she went to bed, staring at the bill he still hadn't read, thinking about the way Elena's eyes softened when she looked at Sophie, thinking about how, for the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone. The shift came on a Tuesday. Elena was in the backyard again, this time planting flowers along the fence line. Daniel was supposed to be working from home, but he kept glancing out the window, watching her dig and plant with the same quiet focus she brought to everything. Sophie was at school. The house was silent, and for once, Daniel let himself admit it. He was falling for her. Not in the desperate, drowning way he'd loved Amanda. This was different. Steadier. Like finding solid ground after months of treading water. He went outside. You're making my yard look bad, he said. Elena looked up, dirt on her hands, a smudge on her cheek. So plant some flowers. I kill everything I touch. I doubt that. He sat down on the grass beside her. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really move here? Elena set down the trowel. For a long moment, she didn't speak. I needed to disappear, she said finally. From what? Someone who thought I belonged to him. Daniel's stomach dropped. Elena, it's not like that, not violent, just controlling. He built an empire and I helped him do it, and when I tried to leave, he couldn't accept it. Who is he? His name is Victor Hale. The name meant nothing to Daniel, but the way she said it, flat, careful, told him everything. He doesn't know where you are? Daniel asked. No, I made sure of that. And if he finds out? Elena looked at him, and for the first time he saw fear in her eyes. Then I run again. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation. Victor Hale. An empire. A woman who disappeared. He picked up his phone and searched the name. The results were immediate and overwhelming. Victor Hale, tech billionaire, real estate mogul, venture capitalist. His face stared out from a dozen articles, sharp suit, cold smile, eyes like glass. And beside him, in one of the older photos, was Elena. She looked different, polished, distant, like she was wearing someone else's skin. The caption read, Victor Hale and business partner Elena Whitmore at the annual Tech Summit Gala. Business partner. Daniel scrolled further. There were more photos, more articles. A company called Hale Whitmore Ventures. Billion-dollar acquisitions. Court filings from a dissolved partnership. And then 6 months ago, Elena Whitmore had vanished from public record entirely. Daniel set the phone down, his hands shaking. She hadn't just walked away from money. She'd walked away from a man who could buy and destroy anything he wanted. And now she was living next door, planting flowers, drinking coffee with a single dad who could barely keep his own life together. Daniel got out of bed and went to the window. Elena's house was dark. But somewhere out there, Victor Hale existed, and if he ever found her, Daniel didn't let himself finish the thought. Instead, he went to Sophie's room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. Her rabbit was tucked under one arm, her face peaceful in the glow of her nightlight. Whatever was coming, he'd deal with it, because Elena had shown up for him, and he wasn't going to let her face this alone. Daniel didn't tell Elena that he knew. 3 days passed after he'd found the articles, the photos, the trail of a life she'd abandoned. He went to work, picked up Sophie, made dinner, helped with homework. Normal routines, normal conversations. But every time he looked at Elena, across the fence, on her porch, in his kitchen drinking coffee, he saw the ghost of that woman in the gala photo, standing beside a man whose eyes looked like they could cut glass. She'd told him the truth, just not all of it. And he understood why. Some things were too heavy to hand over all at once. It was Friday evening when Sophie asked if Elena could come over for pizza, and Daniel found himself texting her before he could overthink it. Pizza night. Sophie's request. You in? The reply came 30 seconds later. I'll bring dessert. She showed up with a bakery box of cannoli and a bottle of red wine that looked expensive. Sophie dragged her to the living room to show off a Lego castle she'd been building for a week, and Daniel stood in the kitchen listening to their voices. Sophie's high and excited, Elena's warm and patient, and felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Or they ate pizza on paper plates, sitting on the floor because Sophie insisted the couch was lava. Elena asked questions about the castle's structural integrity with complete seriousness, and Sophie explained her engineering choices like she was pitching to a board of directors. This tower is the strongest because it has 4 corners, Sophie said, pointing. Smart, Elena said. Triangles are stronger, but squares are easier to build. How do you know that? I used to design buildings. Sophie's eyes went wide. Like a princess castle? More like office buildings, but same idea. Daniel watched them, sauce on his fingers, wine warm in his chest. Amanda had never sat on the floor with Sophie like this. She'd loved their daughter in her way, but she'd always been somewhere else, mentally, emotionally, already halfway out the door. Elena was here. Fully, completely here. After Sophie went to bed, they sat on the back porch with the rest of the wine. The night was cool, crickets singing in the grass, the fence between their yards barely visible in the dark. She's getting attached to you, Daniel said quietly. Elena took a sip of wine. Is that a problem? I don't know yet. You think I'm going to leave? It wasn't a question, and Daniel didn't try to deny it. I think you've done it before. Elena set her glass down on the railing. I have, but not like you're thinking. Then tell me how I should be thinking. She was quiet for a long time. The crickets filled the silence, and somewhere down the street a dog barked twice and went quiet. I was 24 when I met Victor, Elena said finally, fresh out of business school, drowning in debt, desperate to prove I was worth something. He saw potential in me that I didn't see in myself. We built a company together, Hale Whitmore Ventures. I worked 18-hour days. I gave him everything. And he gave you what? Success? Money. A life that looked perfect from the outside. She picked up her glass again, stared into it. And then one day I woke up and realized I didn't recognize myself anymore. I was making decisions I didn't believe in, hurting people to close deals, becoming someone I hated. So you left. I tried to. Victor doesn't accept failure, and to him, me leaving was failure. He offered me more money, a bigger title. When that didn't work, he tried to make me feel guilty. Then he tried to isolate me from everyone I cared about. Her voice went flat. He's very good at control. He doesn't have to threaten you. He just makes it clear that your life will be significantly harder if you don't do what he wants. Daniel's jaw tightened. Did he hurt you? Not physically, but there are other ways to hurt someone. And now? Now I'm here. And as far as I know, he has no idea where I am. She looked at him. I'm not planning to leave, Daniel. Not unless I have to. What would make you have to? If he found me. If staying put you and Sophie in danger. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. Neither do you. Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're an optimist. I'm a realist who's had enough taken from me. I'm not letting someone I care about disappear because of some asshole billionaire. The words hung between them, heavier than he'd intended. Elena set her glass down again and turned to face him fully. You care about me? Yeah, Daniel said. I do. Even though I come with baggage? Everyone's got baggage. At least yours is interesting. She laughed, surprised, genuine, and the tension broke just enough for Daniel to breathe again. For what it's worth, Elena said, I care about you too, both of you. Worth a lot, actually. They sat there until the wine was gone and the crickets went quiet. And when Elena finally said goodnight, Daniel walked her to the fence and watched her cross into her yard, her silhouette disappearing into the dark house. He went inside and locked the door, checked on Sophie, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Victor Hale. The name sat in his mind like a stone. Daniel had never met the man, never even heard of him before 3 days ago, but he already hated him with a clarity that surprised him. Not because of what Victor had done to Elena, though that was enough, but because men like Victor thought they owned the world and everyone in it, and Daniel had spent too long feeling powerless to let that stand. The following week passed in a strange, suspended calm. Daniel worked. Elena worked remotely from home, doing freelance consulting she didn't talk much about, and Sophie started referring to Elena as Miss Elena, with the kind of reverence she usually reserved for her favorite teacher. They fell into a rhythm. Coffee in the mornings when their schedules aligned. Dinner twice during the week when Daniel was too tired to cook, and Elena showed up with takeout and an easy smile. A trip to the park on Saturday where Sophie ran herself ragged on the swings and Elena pushed her higher than Daniel would have dared. She's going to fly off, Daniel said, only half joking. She's fine. Kids are indestructible. Tell that to my insurance. Elena laughed and kept pushing, and Sophie shrieked with joy, and for a few hours Daniel let himself believe this was his life now, simple, stable, safe. Then Monday came. Daniel was at his desk, 3 emails deep into a supply chain issue, when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Daniel Mercer? The voice was male, smooth, professional. Yeah, who's this? My name is Marcus Trent. I'm an attorney representing a concerned party regarding the welfare of your daughter, Sophie Mercer. Daniel's blood went cold. What? I'm calling to inform you that a petition has been filed questioning the current custody arrangement. My client believes there may be grounds for a welfare review. Who the hell is your client? I'm not at liberty to disclose that at this time. You'll be receiving formal documentation within the next 48 hours. I'd recommend securing legal representation. This is insane. Sophie's mother has full joint custody. If she had a problem, this petition is not for Ms. Amanda Mercer. As I said, you'll receive the full details shortly. Have a good day, Mr. Mercer. The line went dead. Daniel sat there, phone still pressed to his ear, the office noise around him fading to white static. A custody challenge. From someone who wasn't Amanda. His hands were shaking when he set the phone down. Greg appeared at the edge of his cubicle. You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. I need to go. What? I need to leave. Right now. Daniel grabbed his jacket and keys and walked out, ignoring Greg's protests, ignoring the confused looks from his coworkers. He got to his car and sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. A concerned party. Someone with enough money to hire an attorney to file a petition. Someone who knew about Sophie. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should choose your companions more carefully, Mr. Mercer. Daniel stared at the message, his pulse hammering in his ears. Then he called Elena. She answered on the second ring. Hey, what's... He knows. Silence. Daniel, what are you talking about? Victor. He knows. He knows about me, about Sophie, and he just had a lawyer call me about a custody challenge. What? Her voice went sharp. Are you serious? Dead serious. I'm on my way home. We need to talk. I'll be there in 5. She was waiting on his porch when he pulled up, her face pale, arms crossed like she was holding herself together by force. Daniel got out of the car and she met him halfway across the yard. Tell me exactly what happened. He repeated the call, word for word, and showed her the text. Elena's jaw tightened as she read it, her eyes dark and furious. That bastard! How did he find you? I don't know. I was careful. I didn't use my real name when I signed the lease. I've been paying cash for everything. She stopped, her face going even paler. The flowers. What? I ordered flowers last week from a local shop. Used my credit card because I didn't have enough cash. It was one transaction, one stupid mistake. Daniel felt sick. And he's been monitoring your accounts. Of course he has. Elena's voice cracked. He probably has people watching every financial institution in the country. One charge, one ping, and he'd know exactly where I am. Okay, so he knows where you are. But why come after me? Why Sophie? Elena looked at him, and he saw the guilt in her eyes before she spoke. Because you're the only leverage he has. He can't control me anymore, so he'll control the people I care about. If he can take Sophie from you, he thinks you'll come back. Yes. Daniel turned away, his hands in his hair, his mind racing. A lawyer, a petition, a billionaire who treated people like chess pieces. We need to get ahead of this, he said. I need to call Amanda. I need to find a lawyer. Daniel, you don't understand. Victor doesn't play fair. He'll manufacture evidence. He'll pay people to lie. He'll bury you in legal fees until you can't afford to fight anymore. Then what am I supposed to do? Just let him take my daughter? No. Elena's voice was hard now, steady. You fight. But you don't fight alone. What does that mean? It means I'm not running this time. They went inside. Daniel called Amanda first, his hands still shaking, and when she answered, her voice was clipped and annoyed. What is it, Daniel? I'm in a meeting. Someone's filing a custody petition against me. For Sophie. A pause. What are you talking about? An attorney called, said there's a welfare review being filed. I thought, maybe you... I didn't file anything. Is this some kind of joke? I wish it was. Amanda's tone shifted, concern bleeding through the irritation. Who would do that? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Well, keep me informed. Sophie's my daughter too. Yeah, I'll call you when I know more. He hung up and looked at Elena, who was pacing the length of the living room, her phone in her hand. I'm calling my old attorney, she said. She's expensive, but she's ruthless. If Victor's coming after you, you need someone who knows how he operates. I can't afford expensive. I can. Elena, don't argue with me. This is my fault. I'm fixing it. It's not your fault some psychopath can't let go. It's my fault you're in his crosshairs. Daniel crossed the room and caught her wrist, stopping her pacing. Hey, look at me. She did, and her eyes were wet. This isn't on you, he said. Okay? Whatever Victor's doing, it's his choice. You didn't make him into a controlling asshole, and you sure as hell didn't ask him to target my family. But if I hadn't, If you hadn't moved in next door, I'd still be drowning in that kitchen, completely alone, going through the motions and pretending I was fine. You showed up, Elena. You made my life better, Sophie's life better. I'm not going to let him take that away." A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away, angry at herself, and nodded. Okay. She made the call. Daniel listened to her side of the conversation, clipped, professional, explaining the situation with the kind of precision that reminded him she'd once been a businesswoman who built empires. When she hung up, her expression was grim. "Her name's Diane Cassidy. She's taking the case. She'll have someone deliver paperwork to you by tomorrow morning." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly." The paperwork arrived the next day via courier, and it was worse than Daniel had imagined. The petition claimed Daniel was an unfit parent based on allegations of neglect, financial instability, and an unsafe home environment. It cited anonymous reports from concerned neighbors. It included photographs, his house from the outside, looking shabby and half-repaired, Sophie's daycare, his car, old and dented. None of it was illegal. All of it was designed to paint a picture of a man barely holding it together. The worst part was that some of it was true. His house was shabby, his car was old, he was financially stretched, but he wasn't neglectful, he wasn't unfit, he was just tired. Diane Cassidy called that afternoon. Her voice was sharp and direct, no wasted words. "Mr. Mercer, I've reviewed the petition. It's garbage, but it's well-constructed garbage. Whoever filed this has money and resources, and they're using both. Can they actually take Sophie? Not if I have anything to say about it. But you need to be prepared for a fight. They'll dig into your life, your finances, your work history, your relationships. Every mistake you've ever made will be on the table. I've got nothing to hide." "Everyone has something to hide, Mr. Mercer. The question is whether it's relevant. I'll need you to come in tomorrow. Bring every document you have related to Sophie's custody, your divorce, your employment, everything." "I'll be there." He hung up and sat in the silence of his living room, the petition still on the coffee table. Elena appeared in the doorway. She'd been next door giving him space, but he'd texted her when the papers arrived. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "We'll get through this." "You don't know that." "I know Victor. He's powerful, but he's not invincible. And he's used to people rolling over. When they don't, he doesn't know what to do." "I'm not rolling over." "Good." They sat there in the quiet, the weight of the petition pressing down on both of them, and Daniel felt the absurdity of it all, how quickly his life had shifted from lonely but manageable to this. But he also felt Elena beside him, solid and real, and Sophie asleep upstairs, safe for now. And that was enough. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel's life became a series of meetings, phone calls, and documentation. Diane Cassidy was exactly as ruthless as Elena had promised. She tore through the petition's claims methodically, gathering counter-evidence, interviewing character witnesses, building a case that Daniel was not only a fit parent, but a devoted one. Greg from work wrote a letter. Sophie's daycare director wrote another. Even Amanda, in a rare moment of cooperation, sent a statement confirming that Daniel had never been anything but responsible. But the pressure kept building. Anonymous reports continued to surface, claims that Daniel left Sophie alone, that the house was unsafe, that he'd been seen drinking heavily. All lies, but lies that had to be addressed, documented, refuted. Daniel barely slept. He kept Sophie's routine as normal as possible, but she noticed. "Daddy, are you okay?" She was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing a picture of a house with a crooked chimney. "I'm fine, sweetheart. You don't look fine. Just grown-up stuff, nothing for you to worry about." She frowned, unconvinced, but went back to her drawing. Elena had become a constant presence. She helped with Sophie when Daniel had to meet with Diane. She brought meals when he forgot to eat. She sat with him late at night when the anxiety got too loud and reminded him to breathe. "You're doing everything right," she said one night. "Doesn't feel like it." "That's because you're scared, but scared doesn't mean wrong." "What if I lose her, Elena?" "You won't. You can't promise that." "No. But I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't happen." The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks out. Diane was confident, but she warned Daniel that Victor, or whoever was funding this, would likely try to settle before it got to court. "They don't want this public," she said. Too many questions. If we push hard enough, they'll back off. And if they don't, then we go to war. 2 days before the hearing, Daniel came home to find a man standing on his porch. He was tall, mid-50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Daniel's car. His hair was silver, his posture perfect, and when he turned to face Daniel, his smile was thin and cold. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Victor Hale." Daniel's heart stopped. Victor extended a hand. Daniel didn't take it. "What are you doing here?" "I thought we should talk, man to man." "I've got nothing to say to you." "I think you do." Victor glanced at the house. "Charming place, a bit rough around the edges, but I'm sure you're doing your best." "Get off my property." Victor's smile didn't waver. "I'm not here to fight, Mr. Mercer. I'm here to offer you a solution." "I don't want anything from you." "Not even your daughter's security?" Victor tilted his head. "Here's the situation. You're a single father, struggling financially, living in a house that's falling apart. You love your daughter, I don't doubt that. But love doesn't pay for college. It doesn't provide stability." Sophie's fine. For now. But what about next year? The year after? How long can you keep this up? Daniel's fists clenched. "What do you want?" "I want Elena to come back. And you're going to convince her." "Go to hell." Victor's expression finally shifted. Just a flicker of irritation, quickly smoothed over. "Let me be clear. If this goes to court, I will bury you. I will drag your name through every newspaper, every blog, every social media platform. I will make sure everyone knows that Sophie Mercer's father is a broke, desperate man clinging to a custody arrangement he can't sustain. You're bluffing. Am I?" Victor reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, handed it to Daniel. "Open it." Daniel did. Inside were photos, him and Elena on the porch, drinking wine, Sophie playing in the yard, timestamps, locations, angles that made it clear someone had been watching for weeks. His stomach turned. "I have investigators watching you," Victor said calmly. "I know where you work, where Sophie goes to school, what time you pick her up. I know Elena's been staying here helping with your daughter. That's going to look very interesting to a judge, don't you think? A single father introducing his 6-year-old to a woman he barely knows?" Daniel's voice came out low and dangerous. "If you come near my daughter, I don't have to. The system will do it for me." Victor tucked the folder under his arm. "Here's my offer. Convince Elena to meet with me. One conversation. If she agrees to discuss coming back, I drop the petition. You keep Sophie. Everyone wins. Except Elena. Elena made her choice when she walked away from everything we built. Now she has to live with the consequences. She doesn't owe you anything." Victor's eyes went flat. "She owes me everything. And so do you, if you want to keep your daughter." He turned and walked to a black sedan parked at the curb. The driver opened the door and Victor slid inside, the car pulling away without another word. Daniel stood on the porch, the folder still in his hand, his pulse hammering. Elena was crossing the yard before he could move. "Was that him?" Daniel nodded, unable to speak. "What did he say?" He handed her the folder. She opened it, her face going pale as she flipped through the photos. "He wants you to meet with him," Daniel said. "Says if you do, he'll drop the petition." "And if I don't?" "He destroys me in court. Takes Sophie." Elena closed the folder, her hands trembling. "Then I'll meet with him." "No." "Daniel, no, I'm not letting you walk back into that. It's one conversation. It's never just one conversation with guys like him. He'll manipulate you. He'll guilt you. He'll make promises he won't keep. And even if you say no, he'll use it against you." "Then what do we do?" Daniel looked at her, this woman who'd shown up in his life and changed everything, and made a decision. "We fight." The decision to fight didn't come with a manual. Daniel sat in Diane Cassidy's office the next morning, the folder of surveillance photos spread across her desk like evidence at a crime scene. Elena was beside him, her posture rigid, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Diane studied the photos with the detached precision of a surgeon examining an X-ray. "This is intimidation," she said finally. "Classic power play. He wants you scared." "It's working," Daniel said. "Good. Scared means you're taking it seriously." Diane closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "But here's what he doesn't know. This actually helps us." Elena frowned. "How?" Because he's shown his hand. He's not going through proper legal channels anymore. He's making threats, conducting surveillance, trying to force a private meeting. That's harassment. And if we can prove he's behind the custody petition, we can countersue for abuse of process. Can you prove it? Daniel asked. Not yet, but I'm working on it. Diane tapped the folder. I've got an investigator tracing the funding behind the petition. These things leave paper trails, even when people try to hide them. Give me a week. The hearing's in 2 days. I know, which is why we need to be ready for anything. She looked at Elena. He's going to push for that meeting. He'll make it sound reasonable. Just a conversation, no strings attached. Don't fall for it. I won't. And you? Diane turned to Daniel. At the hearing, you need to be calm, composed, and completely honest. Don't let them rattle you. They'll try to paint you as unstable, irresponsible. You counter that by being the opposite. I can do that. Can you? Because the second you lose your temper, the second you get defensive, you hand them ammunition. Daniel met her eyes. I said I can do it. Diane studied him for a moment, then nodded. Good. Now let's talk strategy. They spent the next 2 hours going over every possible angle, questions the opposing counsel might ask, documentation they'd need, character witnesses they could call. By the time they left, Daniel's head was spinning and his stomach was in knots. Elena drove them back in silence. Daniel stared out the window, watching the city blur past, trying to organize the chaos in his mind into something that made sense. You're quiet, Elena said. Just thinking. About? How fast everything fell apart. 2 months ago, my biggest problem was a broken fence. Now I'm fighting to keep my daughter. This isn't your fault. Feels like it. Elena pulled into his driveway and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. When I left Victor, Elena said quietly, I thought the hardest part was walking away. Giving up the money, the status, the life I'd built. But it wasn't. The hardest part was realizing that he'd never really seen me as a person. I was an asset, a tool, something he could use and control. He's a sociopath. Maybe. Or maybe he just never learned that people aren't things you own. She turned to look at Daniel. I'm sorry he's doing this to you. I'm sorry Sophie's caught in the middle, but I'm not sorry I'm here. Neither am I. They went inside. Sophie was at daycare for another hour, which meant the house was quiet and empty in a way that felt both peaceful and unsettling. Elena made coffee while Daniel paced the kitchen, his mind still turning over Diane's words. What if we lose? He said. Elena set a mug in front of him. We won't. You don't know that. No, but I know Victor. He's used to people backing down. He's not used to people fighting back, especially not people with nothing to lose. I have everything to lose. Exactly, which means you'll fight harder than he ever could. Daniel picked up the coffee but didn't drink it. What happens if this goes public? If people find out who you are? Then they find out. I stopped caring about my reputation when I walked away from that life. But it'll get messy. Reporters, questions, all of it dredged back up. Elena shrugged. Let it be messy. I'm done hiding. There was a fierceness in her voice that Daniel hadn't heard before, and it steadied something in him. If she could stand in the wreckage of her old life and not flinch, maybe he could too. The hearing was held in a small, sterile courtroom that smelled like floor polish and stale air. Daniel sat at a table beside Diane, his tie too tight, his palms sweating. Across the aisle was the opposing counsel, a man in his 40s with a forgettable face and an expensive suit, flanked by a paralegal who looked too young to be out of law school. Victor wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. Men like him didn't show up to hearings. They sent proxies. The judge was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She reviewed the petition with the kind of methodical slowness that made Daniel want to climb out of his skin. Finally, she looked up. This is a preliminary hearing to determine whether there's sufficient cause to proceed with a full custody review. Mr. Trent, you represent the petitioner. Please present your case. The opposing counsel stood. His voice was smooth, practiced, designed to sound reasonable. Your Honor, my client is deeply concerned about the welfare of Sophie Mercer. Evidence suggests that her father, Daniel Mercer, is struggling to provide a stable home environment. He works long hours, leaving Sophie in daycare for extended periods. His financial situation is precarious at best. And recent reports indicate he's introduced a new romantic partner into Sophie's life without proper vetting. Daniel's jaw clenched. Diane put a hand on his arm, a silent warning. Furthermore, Trent continued, there have been anonymous reports from neighbors expressing concern about the home's condition and Mr. Mercer's ability to care for his daughter. Anonymous reports? The judge said, her tone skeptical. Yes, Your Honor. Individuals who wish to remain unnamed out of fear of retaliation. Diane stood. Your Honor, these so-called anonymous reports are hearsay at best and fabrications at worst. My client has never been investigated by Child Services, has a spotless record with Sophie's school and daycare, and has full cooperation from Sophie's mother regarding the current custody arrangement. Is the mother present? The judge asked. No, Your Honor, but we have a written statement from Amanda Mercer confirming that she has no concerns about Mr. Mercer's parenting. The judge made a note. Mr. Trent, who is your client? Trent hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but Daniel caught it. My client wishes to remain anonymous at this time, Your Honor. That's not how this works, Counselor. If you're filing a petition, I need to know who's filing it and what their standing is. My client is acting as a concerned party with knowledge of the situation. That's not an answer. Diane leaned forward. Your Honor, we believe this petition is being funded by a third party with no legal standing and no legitimate concern for Sophie's welfare. This is harassment disguised as legal action. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Cassidy. And I'm prepared to back it up. We have evidence that Mr. Mercer and his family are being surveilled by private investigators hired by an individual with a personal vendetta against a member of Mr. Mercer's household. The judge's eyebrows rose. Surveilled? Diane produced the folder of photos and handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The courtroom went silent as she flipped through them. When she looked up, her expression was cold. Mr. Trent, do you have an explanation for this? I have no knowledge of any surveillance, Your Honor. Then I suggest you find out. Because if this petition is part of a harassment campaign, I will dismiss it and sanction everyone involved. She closed the folder. I'm postponing this hearing for 2 weeks. In that time, Mr. Trent, you will provide the court with the identity of your client and evidence that they have legal standing. Ms. Cassidy, you'll have the opportunity to present counter-evidence. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor, they both said. The judge banged her gavel. We're adjourned. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Diane gathered her papers, her expression unreadable. Is that good? Daniel asked quietly. It's better than bad. She's skeptical, which means she's paying attention, but we're not out of the woods yet. They left the courthouse and Daniel spotted Elena waiting on the steps, her arms crossed against the cold. She straightened when she saw him. Well? Postponed. 2 weeks. Relief flickered across her face, followed quickly by worry. That gives him more time. It also gives us more time, Diane said. My investigator's close. If we can tie Victor to the petition before the next hearing, we can end this. And if you can't, then we fight it out in court. Either way, we're prepared. Elena nodded, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. They said goodbye to Diane and walked to the parking lot. Daniel's hands were shaking from the adrenaline crash, and he fumbled with his keys. Let me drive, Elena said. He didn't argue. They picked up Sophie from daycare, and she climbed into the back seat chattering about a science project involving volcanoes and baking soda. Daniel listened, letting her voice wash over him, grounding him in something real and normal. When they got home, Sophie ran inside to build the volcano on the kitchen table, and Daniel and Elena stood in the driveway, the late afternoon sun slanting across the yard. You okay? Elena asked. I don't know. Ask me in 2 weeks. You did good in there. I didn't do anything. Diane did all the talking. You didn't fall apart. That's something. Daniel looked at her. What happens if this doesn't work? If Victor keeps pushing? Then we push back harder. He's got infinite resources, Elena. I've got a used car and a mortgage I can barely afford. He's got money. You've got something he doesn't. What's that? People who actually care about you. Daniel wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that caring mattered more than power, that love could outweigh money. But he'd been through a divorce. He knew how the system worked. He knew that good intentions didn't always win. Still, he nodded. Because what else was there to do? The next few days were tense and strange. Daniel went to work, came home, helped Sophie with homework, made dinner. Normal routines overlaid with the constant hum of anxiety. Victor didn't make contact again, which somehow felt worse than if he had. The silence was a waiting game, and Daniel didn't know what he was waiting for. Then, 6 days after the hearing, Diane called. "We've got him." Daniel nearly dropped the phone. "What?" My investigator traced the funding. The petition was filed by a shell company owned by a holding group that's tied to Hale Whitmore Ventures. Victor's fingerprints are all over it. "Can you prove it?" "I've got bank records, incorporation documents, the works." He tried to bury it under 3 layers of corporate entities, but he got sloppy or arrogant. Either way, we've got enough to show the judge that this petition is retaliation, not concern. Daniel sat down hard on the couch. "So what happens now?" "Now I file a motion to dismiss and a counter-complaint for abuse of process. With this evidence, the judge will throw out the petition, and if we're lucky, she'll sanction Victor for wasting the court's time." "And Sophie?" "Sophie stays with you, full stop." Daniel closed his eyes. Relief hit him like a wave, so strong it made him dizzy. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "Don't thank me yet. Victor's not going to take this lying down. He'll try something else. Let him. I'm ready." He hung up and immediately called Elena. She answered on the first ring. "Diane's got proof. It's over." "What?" Her voice cracked. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. She's filing to dismiss tomorrow. Sophie's safe." Elena didn't respond right away, and when she did, Daniel could hear tears in her voice. "I'm coming over." She was there in under a minute, bursting through the door and pulling Daniel into a hug so tight it knocked the breath out of him. He held on, his face pressed into her hair, and felt something inside him finally unclench. "It's over," he said again, like saying it would make it real. "Not yet," Elena said. "But almost." Sophie wandered in from the living room, her volcano half finished on the table. "Why are you hugging?" "Because we're happy," Daniel said. "Why?" "Because sometimes good things happen, kiddo." Sophie seemed to accept this and went back to her volcano. Daniel and Elena pulled apart, both of them smiling like idiots. "I should open champagne," Daniel said, "except I don't have any. We'll settle for bad beer and good company." They sat on the back porch while Sophie worked inside, and Daniel told her everything Diane had said. Elena listened, her expression shifting from relief to something harder. "He's going to be furious," she said. "Good." "Daniel, I'm serious. Victor doesn't lose. And when he does, he makes sure everyone around him suffers for it." "What's he going to do? He already played his hand." "I don't know, but he'll do something." Daniel reached over and took her hand. "Then we'll deal with it, together." Elena looked at him, and for the first time since Victor had shown up on his porch, she looked like she believed it. The motion to dismiss was filed the next day. Daniel waited for a response, an angry call, a threatening letter, something. But there was nothing. Victor Hale had gone silent. A week passed, then another. The second hearing date came and went, the petition dismissed without argument. The judge issued a warning to the shell company behind it. Though everyone in the room knew the warning would go nowhere, Daniel got the official notification in the mail. Custody unchanged, case closed. He stood in his kitchen holding the letter, reading it 3 times to make sure it was real. Sophie was safe. The nightmare was over. He called Elena and told her, and she cried again, this time out of sheer relief. That night, they celebrated. Daniel ordered pizza, Elena brought a cake from the bakery, and Sophie wore a paper crown she'd made at school because she'd decided it was a party, and parties required crowns. They ate on the living room floor, plates balanced on their knees, and Sophie told a long, rambling story about a girl in her class who claimed her dad was a superhero but was probably lying. "Why would she lie?" Elena asked. "Because superheroes aren't real," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "Are you sure?" Sophie considered this. "Maybe, but I've never seen one." Daniel caught Elena's eye across the room, and they both smiled. After Sophie went to bed, they sat on the porch with the last of the cake, the night warm and still. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Daniel admitted. "Me too." "Think it will?" "I don't know. Maybe." Elena set her plate aside. "But I'm done letting Victor dictate my life. If he comes back, we'll handle it. If he doesn't, we move on. Just like that? Just like that. Daniel wanted to believe it was that simple, but he'd seen the fear in her eyes when Victor's name came up, the way her hands shook when she talked about him. Do you think he'll let it go? Daniel asked. No, Elena said honestly, but I think he'll wait. Regroup. Try a different angle. What angle? I don't know, but Victor's patient when he wants to be. He'll make us think it's over, and then he'll strike when we're not looking. That's comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you, I'm trying to prepare you. Daniel looked at her. This woman who'd walked away from billions, who'd planted flowers in his yard and helped his daughter build Lego castles, who'd stood beside him when a powerful man tried to destroy his life. Why did you really leave him? Daniel asked. Elena was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Because I looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the person staring back. I'd become someone who justified cruelty as strategy, who measured success in dollars instead of impact. Victor didn't make me that way. I chose it, but he encouraged it, rewarded it, and when I tried to change, he made it clear that wasn't an option. So you ran. So I left. There's a difference. Is there? Running implies you're afraid. Leaving means you're done. Daniel turned that over in his mind. And now? Now I'm building something different, something that's mine. With me? Elena met his eyes. If you'll have me. Daniel's heart kicked hard against his ribs. Yeah, I'll have you. They sat there in the quiet, the space between them charged with something neither of them had named yet, but both of them felt. Then Elena stood. I should go. Let you get some sleep. You could stay. The words were out before Daniel could think them through. Elena looked at him, surprised, and he felt his face heat. Not like that, he added quickly. I just meant you're here all the time anyway, and it's late, and I have an extra room. Daniel? Yeah? I'd like that. He blinked. Really? Really? So she stayed. Daniel gave her the guest room, which was really just a glorified storage space with a bed, but Elena didn't seem to mind. She borrowed one of his t-shirts to sleep in, and when she came out of the bathroom, her hair down and her face scrubbed clean, she looked younger, softer. Good night, she said. Good night. Daniel went to his own room and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of Elena just down the hall. He didn't sleep much, but it wasn't the bad kind of sleeplessness, the kind that came with anxiety and fear. It was the kind that came with possibility. The next morning, Sophie found Elena making pancakes in the kitchen and reacted like it was Christmas. You're still here. I am. Are you going to live here now? Elena glanced at Daniel, who was pouring coffee and trying very hard to look casual. Not yet, Elena said, but I might visit more often. Is that okay? Yes. Sophie climbed onto a stool at the counter. Can you make them with chocolate chips? Absolutely. Daniel watched them. Sophie chattering, Elena listening with complete attention, and felt something shift in his chest. This was what home was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not easy, but real. The quiet lasted another week. Daniel started to believe that maybe, just maybe, it really was over. Then Victor made his move. It started small. A post on a local community forum claiming that a registered sex offender had moved into the neighborhood. No name, just an address. Daniel's address. The post was anonymous, untraceable, and completely false. But it spread fast. By the time Daniel saw it, his neighbors were already talking. Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down stopped him in the driveway. Daniel, I don't want to pry, but I saw a post online. It's not true, Daniel said immediately. Of course. I didn't think, well, I just wanted to ask. But her tone said she'd already made up her mind. The next day, someone spray-painted a word across his garage door. Daniel scrubbed it off before Sophie could see, his hands shaking with rage. Elena found him in the driveway, on his knees with a bucket and a sponge, and she didn't ask what happened. She just knelt beside him and helped. He's trying to break you, she said. It's working. No, it's not. You're still here. You're still fighting. I don't know how much more I can take, Elena. She stopped scrubbing and looked at him. Then we end it. How? We go public. We tell the truth, all of it. Daniel sat back on his heels. I go on record about who Victor is, what he did, why I left. I make it public enough that he can't hide behind shell companies and proxies anymore. That'll destroy your privacy. I don't care. Elena, I'm serious. I'm done letting him control the narrative. If he wants a war, I'll give him one. Daniel stared at her, this woman who'd spent months hiding, rebuilding her life in quiet anonymity, and now she was offering to tear it all down to protect him. You don't have to do this, he said. Yes, I do, because he's not going to stop. Not until someone makes him. And you think going public will do that? I think it's the only thing he's actually afraid of. His reputation, public opinion, the truth. Daniel thought about Sophie, about the word on his garage door, about the whispers that would follow his daughter if this kept up. Okay, he said, let's do it. Elena called a reporter that afternoon, someone she'd known years ago, someone she trusted. They met at a coffee shop downtown, and Elena told her everything. The article went live 2 days later. It was front page of the local paper and picked up by national outlets within hours. Elena's story, leaving a billion-dollar company, disappearing to escape a controlling partner, the harassment campaign against a single father, spread like wildfire. Victor Hale's name was everywhere. And for the first time, it wasn't attached to success or power. It was attached to the word abuse. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Daniel's phone started ringing before he'd even finished reading the article. Reporters, bloggers, people he hadn't spoken to in years. All of them wanting a statement, a quote, confirmation that he was the single father mentioned in the piece. He turned his phone off and sat at the kitchen table with Elena, both of them staring at his laptop screen as the story spread across social media like a fire through dry grass. Former billionaire Elena Whitmore breaks silence on abusive partnership. Tech mogul Victor Hale accused of harassment campaign. Single father caught in crossfire of corporate revenge plot. The headlines were sensational, but the details were accurate. The reporter had done her job well. She'd corroborated everything, included statements from Diane Cassidy, documented the custody petition and its suspicious funding. It was thorough, damning, and very, very public. No going back now, Elena said quietly. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. You okay? Ask me tomorrow. They sat there in silence, watching the comments roll in. Most were supportive, people outraged on Elena's behalf, calling Victor a monster, praising her courage. But there were others, people questioning her motives, suggesting she was bitter about the partnership ending, calling her a liar. Don't read those, Daniel said. I'm not. But her eyes were still on the screen. Sophie was at school, which meant they had a few hours before they'd have to explain any of this to her. Daniel wasn't sure how to have that conversation yet. How do you tell a 6-year-old that a stranger tried to take her away because her dad's neighbor used to be rich and powerful? His phone buzzed on the counter, still off, but vibrating with voicemails piling up. Elena's phone was doing the same. We should make a statement, she said, something official, so people stop calling. What would we even say? The truth. That we're not doing interviews, that we've said everything we need to say, and that we're focused on moving forward. Daniel nodded. Diane can help with that. He turned his phone back on long enough to call her, ignoring the flood of notifications. Diane answered immediately. I was wondering when you'd surface. You've seen the coverage? Hard to miss. Ooh, good. It's working exactly like we hoped. Victor's PR team is in damage control mode, and his investors are asking questions. I've already had 2 calls from reporters wanting to know if you're pressing charges. Charges for what? Harassment, abuse of process, surveillance, take your pick. Daniel rubbed his eyes. I just want this over. It will be, but you need to stay visible right now. The second you go silent, the narrative shifts. Let people see you as the good guy, because you are. I don't feel like a good guy. I feel like I'm drowning. That's because you're in the middle of it. Trust me, Daniel, this is the beginning of the end. After they hung up, Elena drafted a statement on Daniel's laptop. It was short, direct, and left no room for misinterpretation. We appreciate the support we've received, but we will not be giving interviews or making further public statements at this time. Our focus is on our family and moving forward. We ask for privacy as we do so. They sent it to Diane, who approved it and released it to the press. Within an hour, it was being quoted in follow-up articles. Daniel picked up Sophie from school that afternoon, bracing himself for questions from the other parents, but no one said anything. A few gave him sympathetic looks. Mrs. Chen waved from across the parking lot, her earlier suspicion apparently forgotten. Sophie climbed into the car, oblivious. "Guess what we did in art today?" "What?" "We made self-portraits with magazines. Mine looked like a monster." "I'm sure it was great." "It wasn't, but Miss Carla said it had character." Daniel smiled despite everything. "Character's good." When they got home, Elena was on the porch with her own laptop, fielding emails. She looked up when they pulled in, and Sophie ran over to show her a drawing she'd made, a house with 3 stick figures standing in front of it. "That's me," Sophie said, pointing to the smallest figure. "And that's Daddy, and that's you." Elena stared at the drawing, something unreadable crossing her face. "It's beautiful." "You can keep it." "Thank you. I will." Sophie ran inside to get a snack, and Daniel joined Elena on the porch. "How bad is it?" he asked, nodding at the laptop. "I've had to block about 50 people, but mostly it's supportive. A few former colleagues reached out. My old assistant sent a very kind email." "Anyone from Victor's camp?" "Not yet. He's smart enough to stay quiet while his lawyers figure out what to do." Daniel sat beside her. "Do you think he'll actually face consequences?" "I don't know. Men like him usually don't. But at least people know the truth now. That's something." It was something. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that Victor wasn't done yet. The next 2 days were a blur of media attention and whispered conversations. The story kept growing. People dug into Victor's past business deals, found other former employees willing to talk about his controlling behavior, uncovered lawsuits that had been settled quietly out of court. Victor Hale, it turned out, had left a trail of wreckage behind him. Elena was just the first person brave enough to put her name to it. By the 3rd day, Victor's company issued a statement denying all allegations and threatening legal action against anyone making defamatory claims. It was the kind of statement designed to sound strong, but read desperate. Diane called it a gift. "He's backed into a corner. The more he pushes back, the guiltier he looks." But Daniel wasn't celebrating. Because late on the 3rd night, when Sophie was asleep and Elena had gone back to her house to get some space from the chaos, Daniel heard a car pull up outside. He looked out the window and his stomach dropped. Victor Hale was standing on the sidewalk, staring at the house. Daniel's first instinct was to call the police. His second was to grab a baseball bat. He did neither. Instead, he walked outside and stood on the porch, arms crossed. "Get off my property." Victor didn't move. He was wearing a long coat, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable in the dim streetlight. "I'm on the sidewalk, public property." "What do you want?" "To talk." "We've got nothing to talk about." "I think we do." Victor took a step closer, still not crossing onto Daniel's lawn. "You won that round. Congratulations. Elena played her cards well. But you need to understand something, Mr. Mercer. This isn't over. The custody case is dismissed. The story's out. You've got nothing left. I have everything left. Money, connections, time. You think one news article is going to destroy me? I've survived worse." "Then why are you here?" Victor smiled, and it was the coldest thing Daniel had ever seen. "Because I want you to know that I don't forget. I don't forgive. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure Elena regrets what she did. She didn't do anything except leave you. She humiliated me. She made me look weak. And now she's dragged my name through the mud for the entire world to see. You did that yourself." Victor's smile vanished. "Stay out of my way, Mr. Mercer. Take care of your daughter, live your little life, and forget you ever met Elena Whitmore. Because if you don't..." "If I don't, what? You'll file another bogus petition? Send more threatening letters? Spray paint more slurs on my garage?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't?" They stared at each other across the yard, the night silent except for the distant hum of traffic. "You're in over your head," Victor said finally. "You're a logistics coordinator with a mortgage and a 6-year-old. I could buy and sell you 10 times over without even noticing. Walk away while you still can." "No." "No?" "You heard me. I'm not walking away, and neither is Elena." Victor studied him for a long moment, then shook his head. "You're a fool." "Maybe. But I'm a fool who's still standing." Victor turned and walked back to his car, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. He got in without another word, and the car pulled away, disappearing into the night. Daniel stood on the porch until the taillights were gone, his heart hammering, his hands shaking. Then he went inside, locked the door, and called Elena. She answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "Victor was just here." "What?" Her voice went sharp. "Are you okay? Is Sophie—" "We're fine. He didn't come onto the property, just stood on the sidewalk and made threats." "What kind of threats?" Daniel told her everything. The conversation, the tone, the look in Victor's eyes that said he wasn't bluffing. "I'm coming over," Elena said. "You don't have to." "I'm already out the door." She was there in under 2 minutes, still in pajama pants and a hoodie, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and absolutely furious. "Did he touch you?" "No, he just talked." "Did you call the police?" "And tell them what? A guy stood on a public sidewalk and had a conversation with me?" Elena paced the length of the living room, her hands in fists. "He's escalating. First the harassment, then the custody case, now direct contact. He's not going to stop." "So what do we do?" "We document everything, every interaction, every threat, every time he or his people come near you, and we get a restraining order." "On what grounds?" "Harassment, intimidation. Diane can make it work." Daniel sat on the couch, suddenly exhausted. "I'm so tired of this. I just want to live my life, take care of my kid, not deal with some psychopath who can't handle rejection." Elena sat beside him, close enough that their knees touched. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I brought this into your life." "Stop apologizing. You didn't do this. He did. But if you hadn't moved in next door, I'd still be miserable and alone. You gave me something to fight for, Elena. Don't apologize for that." She looked at him, her eyes wet, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then she leaned over and kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't smooth or cinematic. It was messy and desperate and tasted like salt from the tears on her cheeks. Daniel kissed her back, his hand coming up to cup her face, and for a few seconds the world narrowed to just the two of them. No Victor, no threats, no fear. When they pulled apart, Elena's breath was shaky. "Sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't you dare apologize for that." She laughed, watery and raw. "Okay, I won't." They sat there in the quiet, foreheads pressed together, and Daniel felt something settle in his chest. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The restraining order was filed the next day. Diane compiled everything: the surveillance photos, the custody petition, the spray-painted slur. Witness statements from Daniel and Elena about Victor's late-night visit. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something. The judge would review it and make a decision within a week. In the meantime, Daniel went back to work. It felt surreal, sitting at his desk fielding emails about shipment delays while his face was still circulating in news articles. Greg kept giving him concerned looks, but didn't ask questions, which Daniel appreciated. At lunch, he got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Mercer, this is Agent Sarah Koslow with the FBI." Daniel nearly dropped his phone. "The FBI?" "Yes, sir. I'm calling regarding Victor Hale. We've been investigating his business practices for several months, and recent media coverage has brought some new information to light. I'd like to speak with you and Ms. Whitmore, if you're willing." "What kind of investigation?" "I can't discuss specifics over the phone, but I can tell you that your cooperation could be very helpful." Daniel's mind raced. "When do you want to meet?" "As soon as possible. Are you available tomorrow?" "I'll make it work." They arranged a time, and Daniel hung up, staring at his desk without seeing it. The FBI. Victor wasn't just facing bad press. He was facing federal charges. Daniel called Elena immediately and told her. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "That's bigger than I thought," she said finally. "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet, but it means they've been watching him for a while. Whatever he did, it's serious." They met with Agent Koslow the next day in a bland conference room at a federal building downtown. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, and got straight to the point. "We've been investigating Hale Whitmore Ventures for wire fraud, tax evasion, and several other financial crimes. Ms. Whitmore, you were listed as a partner until 6 months ago. We'd like to know what you can tell us about the company's operations during your tenure." Elena sat up straighter. I left because I realized what was happening wasn't legal or ethical, but I don't have proof of anything. I walked away clean. Clean in terms of culpability, maybe. But you have knowledge. That's what we need. What kind of knowledge? Kozlow opened a folder and slid several documents across the table. These are financial records from projects you worked on. Do you recognize them? Elena scanned the pages, her expression tightening. Yes, but these numbers are wrong. Wrong how? These projects were reported to investors at one value, but the actual costs were significantly lower. Someone was pocketing the difference. Victor? I don't know for sure, but I raised concerns about discrepancies like this multiple times. He always had an explanation. I believed him until I didn't. Kozlov made notes. We'll need you to go through these records in detail. Identify anything that doesn't match what you remember. Can you do that? Yes. And Mr. Mercer, Kozlow turned to Daniel. The harassment campaign against you is also relevant. It establishes a pattern of behavior, retaliation against anyone who threatens Victor's control. We'll need documentation of everything. I've got it. My lawyer has copies of all of it. Good, send it to me. They spent the next 2 hours going over details, timelines, names. By the time they left, Daniel's head was spinning. You okay? He asked Elena as they walked to the car. I don't know. I just helped build a case against someone I used to trust. He stopped being trustworthy a long time ago. I know, but it still feels like a betrayal. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. He betrayed you first, and he tried to destroy us. You're not the bad guy here. Elena nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Over the next week, the investigation became public. News broke that the FBI was looking into Hale Whitmore Ventures, and the media frenzy intensified. Victor's investors started pulling out. His board called for his resignation. The empire he'd built was crumbling in real time. And through it all, Daniel kept his head down and focused on Sophie. He took her to the park, helped her with her homework, read her bedtime stories. Normal things, small things, the kind of things that reminded him what he was fighting for. Elena was there most nights, sometimes staying over in the guest room, sometimes just sitting on the porch with Daniel after Sophie went to bed. They didn't talk about the kiss. But it hung between them, a question neither of them was ready to answer yet. Then, 10 days after the FBI meeting, the restraining order was granted. Victor Hale was legally prohibited from contacting Daniel, Elena, or Sophie. He couldn't come within 500 feet of any of them. Violation would result in immediate arrest. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. Daniel read the notification 3 times just to make sure it was real. We did it, he said to Elena that night. We did. So what happens now? Elena looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Now we live. But living, it turned out, was harder than it sounded. Because 3 days later, Victor Hale held a press conference. He stood in front of a wall of cameras, his expression calm, his tone measured. He denied all allegations. He claimed the FBI investigation was a politically motivated witch hunt. He painted Elena as a disgruntled ex-partner with an axe to grind. And then he said the thing that made Daniel's blood run cold. I deeply regret that my personal and professional disputes have affected innocent people, including Mr. Daniel Mercer and his daughter. I take full responsibility for any distress they may have experienced, and I want to make it right. He paused, letting the cameras focus on him. To that end, I'm offering Mr. Mercer a settlement, a substantial financial package to cover any legal fees, emotional distress, and to secure his daughter's future. All I ask in return is that he and Ms. Whitmore refrain from making further public statements about me or my company. The room erupted in questions, but Victor just smiled and walked off the stage. Daniel watched the press conference on his phone, his hands shaking. A settlement. Hush money. Victor was trying to buy his silence. Elena was beside him, her face pale. Don't take it. I'm not. He's going to make it sound generous, like he's the good guy trying to fix things. I don't care what he makes it sound like. I'm not taking his money. But even as he said it, Daniel felt the weight of the offer. A substantial financial package. Enough to pay off his mortgage, fix the house, put money away for Sophie's college. Enough to make his life significantly easier. He knows you're struggling, Elena said quietly. That's why he's doing this. He's betting you'll take it. I won't. Are you sure? Daniel looked at her. Yeah, I'm sure. Because some things couldn't be bought, and his integrity was one of them. The settlement offer was delivered by courier the next day, a formal document outlining a payment of $250,000 in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and a promise not to cooperate further with any investigations into Victor or his company. Daniel read it once, then tore it in half. He called Diane and told her what he'd done. Good, she said. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Was there any other option? Legally? Yes. You could have taken the money, but morally? No. Not if you want to sleep at night. Daniel released the statement that afternoon. I have not and will not accept any settlement from Victor Hale. My priority is my daughter's safety and well-being, and no amount of money will change that. The response was immediate. Social media exploded with support. People called him brave, principled, a hero. Daniel didn't feel like any of those things. He just felt tired. But when Sophie came home from school and threw her arms around him, chattering about a spelling test she'd aced, he knew he'd made the right choice. That night, Elena stayed for dinner again. They made spaghetti together, Sophie helping to stir the sauce and getting more of it on herself than in the pot. After she went to bed, Daniel and Elena sat on the porch, the night air cool and still. Thank you, Elena said. For what? For not taking the money. For standing up to him. I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. I know. That's why it matters. Daniel looked at her. What happens next? I don't know. The investigation will take months, maybe years, but eventually he'll face consequences. Or he won't. Either way, we'll be okay. You sound sure. I am. Daniel wanted to kiss her again, but this time he waited, because some things were worth taking slow. Instead, he took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I'm glad you moved in next door, he said. Elena smiled. Me too. They sat there until the stars came out, and for the first time in months, Daniel felt something close to peace. The weeks that followed Daniel's rejection of Victor's settlement offer were quieter than he'd expected. The media moved on to other stories. The constant flood of phone calls slowed to a trickle, then stopped. Life began to settle into something that resembled normal, though normal now included Elena eating breakfast at his table most mornings, and Sophie asking when Miss Elena was going to officially move in. She has her own house, kiddo, Daniel said one Saturday while they folded laundry together. But she's always here anyway. That doesn't mean she lives here. Sophie paired two of her socks with intense concentration. Do you want her to live here? Daniel paused, a t-shirt half folded in his hands. That's a big question. It's not that big, yes or no? Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds. Yeah, I do. Then you should ask her. It's more complicated than that. Why? Because relationships were complicated. Because moving in together was a big step. Because he'd already been through one failed marriage, and the idea of getting it wrong again terrified him. But he didn't say any of that. Instead, he just ruffled Sophie's hair and told her to finish her socks. The FBI investigation continued in the background, a slow-moving machine that Daniel only heard about through occasional updates from Agent Coslow. They'd subpoenaed records, interviewed former employees, built a case that was apparently solid, but would take months to move through the legal system. Victor stayed quiet. No more press conferences, no more late-night visits, no contact at all. The restraining order held, and for the first time since this whole nightmare had started, Daniel allowed himself to believe it might actually be over. Then, 6 weeks after the settlement offer, Diane called. Victor's attorney reached out. They want to negotiate a permanent agreement. Daniel was at work, surrounded by the familiar hum of the office. He stepped into the hallway for privacy. What kind of agreement? A mutual non-contact order. Basically, both parties agree to stay away from each other permanently. No more legal action, no more harassment, no more anything. What's the catch? No catch. They're offering it clean. I think Victor's lawyers finally convinced him to cut his losses. The FBI investigation is getting serious, his company's hemorrhaging money, and he's got bigger problems than his ex-business partner. So he's just giving up? I wouldn't call it giving up. I'd call it strategic retreat. He gets to save face, you get peace of mind, and Elena gets to live her life without looking over her shoulder. Daniel leaned against the wall, processing. And if we say no? Then nothing changes. The restraining order stays in place, but it's temporary. This would be permanent and binding. legally enforceable. I need to talk to Elena. Of course, but Daniel, I recommend taking it. This is as close to a clean ending as you're going to get. He found Elena in her backyard that evening, digging up a patch of grass to plant a vegetable garden. She'd been talking about it for weeks. Tomatoes, peppers, maybe some herbs. A way to put down roots, literally. She looked up when he came through the gate, wiping dirt from her forehead with the back of her hand. Hey, you're home early. Diane called. Victor's lawyers want to make a deal. Elena set down her trowel. What kind of deal? He explained the offer, the mutual non-contact agreement, the permanent separation, the legal protection it would provide. Elena listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. What do you think? Daniel asked when he finished. I think it sounds too good to be true. Diane thinks it's legitimate. Victor's drowning in legal problems. This gets us off his back so he can focus on not going to prison. And if he violates it, immediate legal consequences. Diane said it's airtight. Elena picked up the trowel again, turned it over in her hands. I spent 6 months running from him, hiding, changing my name, paying cash for everything, looking over my shoulder every time I left the house. And now he's just going to walk away? Apparently. It doesn't feel real. I know. She looked at him, and Daniel saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the toll that months of fear and uncertainty had taken. Do you want to take it? I want you to be safe. I want Sophie to be safe. If this does that, then, yeah, I want to take it. Elena nodded slowly. Okay, let's do it. The agreement was finalized 2 weeks later. Daniel and Elena signed their copies in Diane's office, witnessed and notarized, legally binding. Victor signed his remotely, through his attorney, which somehow felt appropriate. He didn't deserve to be in the same room with them. When it was done, Diane shook their hands. Congratulations, you're officially free. Daniel waited to feel relief, but all he felt was tired. They went home. Elena made dinner while Daniel helped Sophie with a book report about a girl who lived in a treehouse. They ate at the kitchen table, the three of them, and Sophie talked about her book and how she wished she could live in a treehouse too. Maybe we could build one, Elena said. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? Sure. Nothing fancy, just a little platform in the backyard. Somewhere to read and hang out. Can we, Daddy? Daniel looked at Elena, who was smiling at Sophie with genuine warmth, and something in his chest loosened. Yeah, we can. Sophie cheered, and the conversation shifted to treehouse logistics. How high, how big, whether it should have a rope ladder or regular stairs. Daniel listened and watched Elena engage with his daughter, like she'd been doing it her whole life, and he realized something. This was his family now. Not perfect, not traditional, but his. After Sophie went to bed, Daniel and Elena sat on the back porch with glasses of wine. Neither of them was really drinking. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Elena said. Me too. But I don't think it's going to. I think it's actually over. Daniel turned to look at her. What are you going to do now? What do you mean? You've been in survival mode for months. Running, hiding, fighting. Now you don't have to. So what do you want? Elena was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft. I want to plant that garden. Build that treehouse. Wake up in the morning and not be afraid. That's it? That's everything. Daniel reached over and took her hand. What about us? What about us? Sophie asked me when you're moving in. Elena's eyebrows rose. Did she? She's not subtle. Gets it from me. And what did you tell her? That it's complicated. Is it? Daniel looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his life through a kitchen window and changed everything. Who'd helped him fix his fence, fight for his daughter, stand up to a man who could have crushed them both. No, he said. It's not complicated at all. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and true. Elena's eyes went bright. You do? Yeah, I do, and I know it's fast, and I know we've been through hell, and maybe we should wait, or take it slow, or whatever the sensible thing is. But I don't want to. I want you here. Every morning, every night. I want to build that treehouse with you. I want Sophie to stop asking when you're moving in because you already live here. A tear slipped down Elena's cheek. I love you too. Yeah? Yeah. Daniel leaned over and kissed her, and this time it wasn't desperate or rushed. It was soft and certain, the kind of kiss that promised more to come. When they pulled apart, Elena was smiling. "So," she said, "I guess I'm moving in." "I guess you are." Sophie's going to lose her mind. She really is. They told her the next morning over pancakes, and Sophie reacted exactly as predicted, screaming with joy, jumping up and down, insisting they start moving Elena's stuff immediately. "Can I help pack?" "Sure," Elena said, laughing. "Can I pick which room is yours?" "I think I'm sharing a room with your dad." Sophie wrinkled her nose. Gross. "You'll understand when you're older. That's what everyone says." It took 2 weeks to move Elena's belongings from next door. She didn't have much. She'd left most of her old life behind when she'd disappeared, and she'd lived minimally since. Clothes, books, a few pieces of furniture, the rest she'd bought secondhand or borrowed. Daniel helped carry boxes, and Sophie insisted on organizing Elena's bookshelf by color, which made no practical sense but looked beautiful. The house felt different with Elena's things in it. Fuller, more lived in, like it was finally becoming a home instead of just a place they slept. One night, after everything was unpacked and Sophie was asleep, Daniel and Elena lay in bed together in the dark. "I never thought I'd have this again," Daniel said. "Have what?" "A partner, someone who actually shows up." Elena rolled onto her side to face him. "I'm not going anywhere." "I know." "Do you?" "Because I need you to really know. I'm here. I'm staying. This is my life now, and I chose it." Daniel reached out and traced the line of her jaw with his thumb. "I know." They were quiet for a while, the house settling around them. "Do you think Victor will actually stay away?" Elena asked. "I think he has to. The agreement's binding, and he's got enough problems without adding more legal trouble." "But do you think he'll let it go? Emotionally?" Daniel considered. "No, I think he'll spend the rest of his life bitter and angry that you got away. But that's his problem, not ours." "I hope you're right." "Me too." 3 months later, the FBI arrested Victor Hale on charges of wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. The news broke on a Wednesday morning, and Daniel saw it on his phone during his lunch break. He called Elena immediately. "Did you see?" "I saw." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the emotion underneath. "How do you feel?" "I don't know. Relieved? Vindicated? Sad, weirdly?" "Sad?" "He was brilliant, you know. When I met him, he was the smartest person I'd ever known. He could have done so much good. And he chose this instead." "That's on him." "I know, but it's still sad." Daniel understood. Elena had spent years of her life building something with Victor, believing in him, trusting him. And that person she'd trusted had never really existed. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I will be." "Come home early. We'll do something nice for dinner." "I'd like that." She did come home early, and they cooked together while Sophie drew pictures at the kitchen table. They didn't talk about Victor or the arrest or any of it. They just existed in the moment, chopping vegetables, stirring sauce, laughing when Sophie spilled her juice, and blamed it on the dog they didn't have. Later, after Sophie was in bed, they sat on the back porch and Elena cried. Not dramatic, heaving sobs, just quiet tears for the life she'd lost and the person she used to be. Daniel held her and didn't try to fix it, because some things couldn't be fixed, only grieved. The trial took almost a year. Daniel and Elena followed it in the news but didn't attend. They'd given their statements, provided their documentation, done their part. The rest was up to the legal system. Victor was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. When the verdict came down, Elena read the news article twice, then closed her laptop and didn't mention it again. "Is it weird that I don't feel anything?" she asked Daniel that night. "No, I think you processed it a long time ago." "Maybe." "He's gone. You're free. That's what matters." Elena nodded. "Yeah, that's what matters." Life moved forward. The treehouse got built. A simple platform with railings and a rope ladder that Sophie climbed up and down approximately 7,000 times a day. Elena's garden flourished. Daniel got a promotion at work. A modest raise that wasn't life-changing but helped. Sophie turned 7. They threw a birthday party in the backyard with 15 screaming kids and a cake shaped like a butterfly. Amanda showed up for an hour, awkward and distant, but she was there. She and Elena spoke briefly, civilly, and then Amanda left. That went better than I expected, Elena said afterward. Low bar, Daniel replied. Still. Sophie asked once, months later, if Elena was going to be her new mom. They were sitting at the kitchen table, Sophie working on homework, Elena helping her sound out words. I already have a mom, Sophie clarified. But she's not around much, and you're around all the time. So is that the same thing? Elena glanced at Daniel, who nodded slightly. I'm not trying to replace your mom, Elena said carefully. But I love you like you're my daughter. So if you want to think of me that way, I'd be honored. Sophie considered this. Can I call you Elena, Mom? You can call me whatever feels right. Okay, Elena, Mom. Daniel had to leave the room so they wouldn't see him cry. 8 months after Elena moved in, Daniel proposed. It wasn't elaborate. No fancy restaurant, no flash mob, no viral moment. Just the three of them in the backyard after dinner, sitting on a blanket under the stars. Sophie was in on it. She'd helped pick out the ring, a simple band with a small diamond that Elena would actually wear instead of keeping in a drawer. Daniel had practiced a speech, something meaningful about love and partnership and choosing each other. But when the moment came, the words evaporated. Instead, he just said, "Marry me." Elena stared at him. What? Marry me. Make this official. Build a life with me. Sophie produced the ring box from behind her back with the solemnity of a child delivering the crown jewels. Elena's hands went to her mouth. You're serious. Completely. We've only been together a year. I know. That's fast. I know. We've been through hell. I know that too. And I'd do it all again if it meant ending up here with you. Elena looked at Sophie, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Did you know about this? I helped pick the ring, Sophie said proudly. Do you like it? Elena took the box, opened it, stared at the ring. When she looked back up, she was crying. Yes. Daniel's heart stuttered. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. Sophie cheered. Daniel slipped the ring onto Elena's finger with shaking hands, and then they were all hugging and laughing and crying at the same time. They got married 3 months later in the backyard. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Sophie was the flower girl and took her duties very seriously. Amanda came, bringing her new boyfriend, and she hugged Daniel before the ceremony. You look happy, she said. I am. Good, you deserve it. It was the kindest thing she'd said to him in years. The ceremony itself was short and simple. No religious elements, just two people promising to choose each other every day. To show up. To fight for what they'd built. When the officiant pronounced them married, Sophie clapped so hard her hands turned red. The reception was a potluck in the backyard. String lights hung between the trees, music playing from a Bluetooth speaker. Nothing fancy, nothing perfect, but it was theirs. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left and Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, Daniel and Elena stood in the backyard looking at the treehouse. We did it, Elena said. We did. I keep thinking about where I was a year and a half ago, running, hiding, terrified, and now I'm here. Here's pretty good. Here is everything. Daniel wrapped his arm around her waist. Do you ever think about him, about what happened? Sometimes, but less and less. It's like a story that happened to someone else. In a way it did. You're not that person anymore. Elena leaned into him. Neither are you. She was right. The man who'd stood in that kitchen drowning in dishes, crushed by loneliness and divorce, barely holding it together, that man was gone. In his place was someone who'd learned to fight, to ask for help, to accept love when it showed up. What do you think Sophie will remember about all this? Elena asked. Hopefully nothing. She was young enough that most of it probably won't stick. I hope she remembers that we fought for her, that we didn't give up. She will. And when she's older, we'll tell her the whole story. What will we say? Daniel thought about it. We'll tell her that life doesn't always go the way you plan, that sometimes it falls apart and you have to rebuild from nothing. But if you're brave enough to let people in, if you're willing to fight for what matters, you can build something better than what you lost. Elena turned to face him. That's what we did, isn't it? Yeah, that's exactly what we did. They stood there in the quiet, the lights twinkling above them, the house warm and full behind them. And Daniel realized something. He'd spent so long focused on what he'd lost. His marriage, his old life, the person he used to be. But loss had made room for this. For Elena. For a family that wasn't bound by obligation or tradition, but by choice. That was the thing they never told you about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes, when you stopped fighting gravity and let yourself fall, you landed somewhere better than where you started. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, and worth every bruise along the way. Sophie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. I can't sleep. Come here, kiddo. Daniel held out his arm, and she shuffled over, letting him scoop her up even though she was getting too big for it. Did all the people go home? Most of them. Is Elena your wife now? She is. Good. I like her. Elena kissed the top of Sophie's head. I like you too. They went inside together, the three of them, and Daniel locked the door behind them. Not to keep the world out, but to keep this moment in. In the months and years that followed, life continued to unfold in the messy, imperfect way that real life does. There were fights and reconciliations, hard days at work, Sophie's struggles with math homework, appliances that broke at inconvenient times, the normal texture of a normal life. But there was also laughter, weekend pancakes, movie nights on the couch, Elena's garden expanding until half the backyard was vegetables, Sophie's treehouse becoming the neighborhood hangout spot. Victor never contacted them again. The restraining order became unnecessary because he simply wasn't part of their world anymore. Eventually, even thinking about him felt like remembering a bad dream from years ago, distant and powerless. Elena started a consulting business helping small companies with ethical business practices. It didn't make her a billionaire, but it made her happy. More importantly, it made her proud of the work she did. Daniel stayed at his logistics job, but he stopped seeing it as a dead end. It was just a job. What mattered was what happened when he left the office, the people waiting for him, the life he'd built. And Sophie grew up in a house filled with love and laughter and the kind of stability that comes from being genuinely wanted. She'd ask sometimes about the time when it was just her and her dad, and Daniel would tell her the truth, that those were hard years, but they led to good ones. Do you think things happen for a reason? Sophie asked once when she was 12 and feeling philosophical. I think things happen, Daniel said, and then we find the reasons. We make meaning out of chaos. Is that what you and Elena did? Yeah, we took a lot of broken pieces and built something new. I'm glad you did. Me too, kiddo. Me too. Because that was the truth, the real lesson buried in all of this. Life breaks you. People hurt you. Plans fall apart. You can spend your energy being angry about it, or you can take the pieces and build something different. Daniel had chosen to build. And what he'd built, this family, this home, this life, was worth every moment of struggle it took to get here. Not perfect, never perfect, but completely, entirely, undeniably his.